Hi everyone, welcome back to another Planetarium live stream. We are here this week, of course, with our virtual dark sky caravan celebrating our dark skies here in northern Minnesota. We were joined last night by Cynthia Lapp from Starry Skies Lake Superior, who told us all about light pollution and what's going on to help protect the dark skies that we have here. And tonight, we at the Planetarium are going to be teaching you about telescopes. For those of you who are interested in maybe starting to get a telescope, but you don't know where to begin, what it's all about, we're going to help you with that. So I am Jessica. I am the Planetarium Director, and with me tonight are a couple of familiar faces and maybe one not so familiar. He's joined us before, but we're excited to have him here as well. So I will we'll start with Lindsay, and we'll go around and let everyone introduce themselves.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm a physics graduate student at UMD.
Hi, I'm Eli. I'm a physics undergraduate student at UMD.
I'm Hamitake Epi. Hello, my relatives. I'm Jim Rock. Let's see. What do I?
You do a lot of things.
I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. I don't know. I want to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up. So I'm taking classes, teaching classes, Director of Indigenous Programming at the Planetarium.
So, she apparently wants to say hi tonight. So, this is Nova.
All right.
She might be peeking her head in a bit because she is feeling a little needy for attention tonight for some reason. Anyway, so I'm going to get switched over to our presentation for telescopes here. And, oops, let me actually pin myself. And then it should, there we go. Okay, so I should be up there in the corner. All right. So as I said, what we're going to be talking to you about tonight is our beginner's guide to telescopes. And so we're going to look at kind of the different types, and then we'll go on to recommend what we think is the perfect kind of beginner's telescope. And then at the end, we'll give you kind of a little step-by-step of what you're going to need to do when you first get it in order to get all set up and start observing. So if you do have any questions throughout the show tonight, be sure to leave them down in the comments. Eli is going to be watching those and will let me know if we have any come up. We'll also have time at the end to talk about it as well. So let's get started. The very first thing we need to go over is, of course, the different types of telescopes. And there are kind of three main types. The first that we're seeing right here is what's called a refracting telescope, or a refractor. Now, these have a lens at the front that gathers light, collects it, and then focuses it toward the back, where you would put your eye or a camera or a scientific instrument. More than likely, for beginners, it's going to be your eye. Now, these were the very first type of telescopes that were made all the way in the early 1600s. I believe 1608 is the first record of a refracting telescope being made. It was actually not invented by Galileo. That's a common misconception. But he was the first to, we think, use them to look up at the heavens, because they were typically being used as like spyglasses or used on ships and stuff. So these are good. These are pretty good. Again, very earliest of telescopes, but they do have some problems. And one of the biggest problems, Nova, stop knocking everything over. One of the biggest problems with refractors is something we call chromatic aberration. And that's just a fancy word for saying that the lens in these telescopes don't focus all of the colors to the same spot. And so what you end up getting is something like you're seeing here on the right, where the red color is focused at a different location than the blue. And so the colors end up kind of spread out and you don't get a good, crisp, clear image. And that's just a problem with glass, with lenses. That's just going to happen. So that leads us into our second type. And that is a reflector, or a reflecting telescope. And these, instead of having a lens at the front, have a mirror at the back of the telescope. And the mirror does a lot of the same things. It gathers the light and then focuses it out towards, again, an eyepiece or a camera or whatever you want to put there. These were actually invented in 1668 by Isaac Newton. And for most accounts, we would say these tend to be cheaper, because it's cheaper to make a mirror than it is to make a big lens. But you also don't have that chromatic aberration that you have with the lens. All of the colors bounce off of the mirror the exact same way, and so they're all going to focus at the same point, and we'll have a sorry, I heard noise. You'll have a nice, crisp, clear image. So that's one of the kind of pros to a reflecting telescope over a refracting lens-based telescope. But that's not to say that these don't have their flaws. A lot of the reflecting telescopes, the mirror has to be curved, and depending on the exact shape of that curve, you may have trouble focusing things along the edge of your view. But most of the time when you're looking through the telescope, what you want to look at is going to be dead center. That's where you want to put it anyway. And so that issue isn't as severe, at least in my opinion. I don't think that's that big of a deal, especially for a kind of beginner's viewing telescope. And then the last kind is actually both. A compound or catadioptric telescope has both a lens and a mirror. And what it's trying to do by having both a lens at the front and a mirror at the back is to try and mitigate both of the flaws that the two independent designs have. And so the mirror helps to correct for that chromatic aberration that lenses have, and the lens helps to correct for that error you could have around the edge of your view with a mirror. And so it's kind of balances out everything. It's supposed to give you a much better view. The downside to this type, though, since it is both a mirror and a lens, they're very expensive. So this is not what we would recommend for a beginner, primarily due to the cost. These are incredibly expensive. All right, so those are your three types of telescopes: your refractor, reflector, and your compound or catadioptric. Of the three, we think that a reflecting telescope is the best sort of entryway into these. They tend to be cheaper for the same size, and you don't have to deal with that chromatic aberration. They give nice, good, clean views. All right, so moving on from there, you may be thinking, well, great, I know what kind of telescope I want. But there is actually more to think about than just the type, because the telescope is going to be sitting on what we call the telescope mount. And those do actually come in a couple of different types. And so the first type that we can see here is called an Altitude-Azimuth, or an Alt-Az. These are just fancy names for different coordinates, kind of like, on the Earth we have longitude and latitude. So altitude is how high you are above the horizon. Azimuth is your direction, northeast, southwest. So they're called altitude-azimuth mounts because that's how they move. They move up, down, and then side to side. And these are definitely what we recommend for a beginner because they are the easiest to set up and the easiest to maneuver, because all you got to do is move side to side and up and down. And so it's very easy to do. But there are a couple of other types, and I just want to kind of tell you what they are so that you're aware of what these words mean. So the other type of mount, or another type of mount that you could have, is called an equatorial mount. And these we do not recommend for beginners. The reason is you have to set these up so that the mount is angled at the correct angle and is pointed due north. And you have to be very precise in your setup for these to, or for the mount to work correctly. Now, the difference here is instead of it moving kind of up, down, side to side, the telescope actually moves on an arc, like this. And that is beneficial because if you've ever seen kind of a time lapse of the night sky, you'll see that the objects move on an arc across the sky. And so the telescope is made to, once you're pointed on an object, all you have to do is follow that arc. And it makes it really easy to follow things across the sky. But in order for that to work, you have to set it up correctly. And because of that steep learning curve in setting it up correctly, we do not recommend this for beginners. But if you're looking to kind of move on from a beginner or looking towards the future, this is something to keep in mind. The other thing, or another kind of type of telescope mount that you could get is a computerized mount, or a go-to. And what this is the mount itself is a computer. It has a database of objects in it, which is great because you can take that remote that comes with it, punch in an object, and it'll go there. Except it's not quite as easy as that, because in order for this to work, you have to set up the telescope and align it so that the computer in the mount knows where it is. And in order to do that, you have to be able to navigate the night sky, because what it does is it asks you, I'm going to point at this star, say Miser, and I want you to get that centered so that I know, the computer knows that it is on that star. And of course, if you don't know what star Miser is, you can't do that. And so this is definitely kind of a step up, more intermediate level. Once you're comfortable navigating the night sky, this is a great type to have. And it does come in Alt-Az and in Equatorial. So you have both of those types, which you can see here. The other downside to these is because it is computerized, they're more expensive. And so these are definitely going to be on the pricier side of telescopes, but they're fantastic to have that go-to feature. The other benefit is once you have it set up, it will automatically track because objects move across the sky throughout the night. And so if you want to stay on, say, the planet Jupiter, you're going to have to constantly move the telescope to stay on the planet as it's moving across the sky over the course of the night. But with these computerized ones, they automatically do that for you. And so they'll follow the object that you have set up. So lots of benefits to these, but again, more intermediate level and definitely a higher price range for that. So of these, the Altitude-Azimuth, that very first one we talked about, is what we recommend for beginners because it's very easy to set up and very easy to use, and also pretty cost effective. They're not super expensive. So a couple of things to kind of look out for, though. Or, no, did I not? Nope, that's coming up. Sorry, I got too far down on my list. So some other things that you need to think about, as other than just the type of telescope and the type of mount, are other things that you want to look for. And a lot of people, when they think of buying a telescope, the first thing they want to do is zoom in really, really close. And that's not necessarily what you want to be thinking of. What you want to think of instead is the aperture, the size of that lens or the mirror. Usually telescopes are described as like a 4-inch telescope, which means the lens or the mirror that's in the telescope has a diameter of 4 inches. That's what we call aperture. And it's this size of the mirror or lens that's going to determine how much light is collected, The bigger it is, the more light it collects, the brighter objects will look to your eye. And it will also give you more detail. The bigger the bigger the aperture, the more detail you can see. And you've got some examples here to kind of show that. And so you really want to think about kind of that. What size are you looking for? And generally, we recommend at least 4 inches, especially if you're wanting to look at some things other than just the moon and see some details on like the planets. You want at least a 4-inch telescope. But you may be thinking, okay, well, obviously bigger is better, so let's just get as big of a telescope as I can. Yes, but there are some other things to think about with that, such as, is your telescope going to be sitting in one place always? Or are you going to be carting it around to different locations? Because if that's the case, you're going to want to make sure your telescope's not so big that it's difficult to carry around. So you want to think about portability. And so for that reason, we tend to recommend not getting any higher than about an 8-inch telescope, because those are big enough to have the benefit of a larger aperture, but they are still very easy to kind of carry around. The other thing you can see here with this telescope is the bigger the telescope, the higher the eyepiece is above the ground. And so you also want to think about who's going to be using it. If you have a bunch of little kids, you may need to either get a smaller one that they can reach or have a step stool around for them to get up to it. Now the other thing, and this is what I thought I was at a minute ago, is as tempting as the really, really cheap telescopes that you may find in big box stores are, you really should avoid these. One, the mounts themselves are very flimsy. They're easy to knock out of place, to knock over. They're not very sturdy. And if you have a kind of wobbly mount, anyone walking nearby is going to shake the telescope and make it hard to see. So you want a good sturdy mount. But the other thing with this is you really do get what you pay for. They're very small, they're cheaply made, and so the views aren't that good. They like to tempt you with all of these beautiful pictures on the box, but you're not going to see that. And so as tempting as the price may be, for not too terribly much money, you can get a much, much better quality telescope that is, instead, what these may do is completely deter you, because they're going to be hard to set up, hard to look through, and aren't going to give you good views, and that might make you go, well, forget about this. I don't want to do this. When instead you could invest couple $100s in a good quality telescope that will hopefully inspire you to keep viewing. So with that, this is what we recommend for a beginner telescope. This is a style of reflecting telescope on an Alt-Az mount that's called a Dobsonian telescope. And that just means that it's a reflecting telescope that sits on this kind of Alt-Az mount that sits on the ground. They are very easy to set up, very easy to use, very lightweight and portable. Most of these tubes are actually like either lightweight plastic or even cardboard. They're super easy. And for 4 to 8 inches in size, which is the aperture we recommend, you will get really good views of the planets, and you could even get some good views of some deep space objects like the Orion Nebula or the Andromeda Galaxy. So to give you a specific, because there are a lot of different telescope brands out there, and so a lot of different Dobsonian style telescopes. Down in the description for this video, I have linked to what I recommend for the beginner telescope. This is made by the company Orion. It is a 6-inch, so it's right in that range, Dobsonian telescope. And I like the kit that I linked because it comes with a lot of good kind of starter things, like Star Wheel, a kind of guide map to help you figure out what to look. It comes with some eyepieces, a red flashlight, which you really want. You don't want to use a regular flashlight when you're out observing. The red helps you see without disrupting your night vision. And so this is a really great kit, and you can see it's about $300. I think the price has gone up a little bit since I took this picture. I think it's around $300 now for all of this, including eyepieces and all of this stuff, and it's a good quality telescope. I will say, I should have put this statement at the beginning and I forgot, that we are in no way affiliated with any of these companies. We're not getting anything out of this, any profits or anything like that. What we're recommending is based off of our experience. This is what I have used, this is what I like, so this is what I recommend. Different people may have different opinions. But with that, I will say there are a few other brands that we can endorse that we have used that are good quality. So the Orion brand is what I just showed you. A couple of other good ones for those Dobsonian beginner telescopes are the company Aperture or Skywatcher. And then the other kind of two big names are Meade and Celestron. And I will say I haven't personally used any of, or I've only used their computerized telescopes. And so that is what I would recommend for a computerized telescope, is either Meade or Celestron, and they're really good quality for those as well. So yeah, that is our recommendation there. This Orion, or this Dobsonian telescope, 4 to 6 inches. If you want a specific one, the Orion XT6 is what I recommend. That link is below if you want to look into that a bit more. I have opted not to go into kind of more of the intermediate and advanced telescopes because I really wanted this to be a beginner's guide. So if you are looking for that kind of next step, after a beginner, feel free to reach out to us at any time and we can help you kind of talk you through your options and things like that. We're always here to help with that. I want to pause and see, Eli, if any questions came in before I move on to the last part.
Nope, no questions.
Okay. All right, so the last thing I wanted to do was give you kind of a little look at what it's going to take when you first get your new telescope, what's going to need to go into kind of setting it up and using it your first time. And the first thing to be aware of is there may be a little bit of assembly. Not the telescope tube itself, that will all be put together, but you may have to put together the mount, the base. And they're really easy to do. So there might be a little bit of assembly the first time. The next thing you're going to want to do is all of these telescopes come with a finder scope. And these are great because they allow you to line up the telescope to your object easily through the finder scope, and then it's like right in your eyepiece. And so it makes it really easy to kind of align your telescope. But the very first time you use it, you've just put the finder scope on, and so it may not be lined up correctly. And so you're going to want to look at like a distant tree or a distant light pole or something to align it so that the center of your finder scope is the center of your eyepiece. And there are detailed instructions on how to do this. Again, if you're having issues with this, you can always talk with us. We'd be happy to help you with it. Now, once that is done, your telescope is pretty much ready to go. As long as you don't move that finder scope off and back on, it's going to stay lined up for the most part. And so these first two steps are just one and done, and your telescope is ready to go. So in order to use it to look at something, the first thing you're going to need to do after putting everything together and getting it all set up is figure out what you want to look at. And this is where having a star chart is very helpful. to figure out where things are in the sky. You can see here there's also a bunch of apps that you can get for your tablets and smartphone that use your GPS location so that you can just hold it up and it'll tell you what's there. But what you're going to want to do is use something like this to find in the sky what you're looking at or what you want to look for. So do you want to look at the moon? Do you want to look at the planet Jupiter? Do you want to look at the star Aldebaran? You'll find it and know that that's where you're pointing. And then you use your finder scope to align your telescope so it's pointed at that object. Look through the eyepiece, and you may need to focus, which is just going to bring that image kind of sharp and into focus. And then you're good. You're set. You are viewing. And yeah, that's what it takes. A little bit of setup at the beginning, but then once you have that, as long as you can locate what you want to see in the sky and then move your telescope there, you will be good to go. And again, this is something that we can help you out with. If you're struggling to learn how to move or align your telescope or find things, again, reach out to us. We would love to help you out with that. All right, so I know a lot of people want to zoom. They want to get as close as they can. And I told you before that you can't really think about the telescope itself in terms of, how much zoom am I going to get? Because it's not wholly the telescope that determines that. It's also the eyepiece you use. And so having a couple of different eyepieces is going to let you look at objects in a couple of different zooms. And so you'll have to switch out the eyepiece to kind of look closer. But there are drawbacks to that, as you can see. The more zoomed in it is, the fainter it might appear. And there's also a limit. There's only so close you can get with your telescope before it doesn't matter. You can't focus it at all. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. Now, that beginner kit that I did link does come with a couple of different eyepieces. So you're all set to have kind of a starter set of eyepieces, which is another reason that I recommend that telescope kit, because it comes with like everything you need to get started. And so with that, for your first time out or first few times out, some really good targets to look at are things that you can find with your naked eye, because it makes it a lot easier to line up your telescope. So things like the moon, the 5 visible planets, any comets or stars that are visible to the naked eye. And then once you get comfortable with that and more comfortable kind of navigating the night sky, you can start looking for slightly more difficult objects like the Orion Nebula, which I have been told is visible to the naked eye in dark enough skies. I've never seen it, but my eyesight also is really bad, so I'm not that surprised. But yeah, there are some other things that you can start trying to search for once you get comfortable with using your telescope and comfortable navigating the sky. And in fact, on Saturday, we are going to have a whole show dedicated to these other objects that you can look at. So with that, let me bring us back. And, oops. There we go. All right. Yeah, that's my beginner's guide right there. I will open it up to Lindsay because she has a lot of experience with this as well. If there's anything else she would like to add, hopefully she would have jumped in if I was saying anything she disagreed with. But I want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to add, Lindsay.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, aligning the telescope is probably the most difficult part, and even when you're experienced, can get really frustrating.
Yeah.
So don't give up. And just know that even experienced people with the telescopes, it still frustrates us sometimes.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than having a group of people waiting for you to get a telescope lined up, and you just can't do it.
what's going on.
It is the most frustrating and embarrassing moment. But it happens.
It's not the most, because mosquitoes can come along, then it's the most.
Fair, very fair. And if you joined us at our telescope stream last night, you would have experienced some of my frustration with this when I was trying to realign the telescope later that night. Yeah, it's definitely, it's an experience. But yeah, and again, I've said this a few times, but I just want to make sure that we are here to help. I know one of the things that we'd like to do, that we were planning on doing in Astronomy Day, that unfortunately was postponed, is to have an actual workshop where you could bring your telescopes and we could help you get started with them. And that's something we still are very much interested in hosting once it's safe to do so. But we are here to help. So yeah. And once you have your telescope, you might be interested in doing things like taking some pictures. And it's easy. Hold on, I'm grabbing. One of the, I would say, easy ways, and I'm not going to say too much because Lindsay's going to be talking about this in a couple days. But you can get these little things that let you hook up your cell phone camera. Or cell phone, which is what I did last night when I streamed from the telescope, is I just put my cell phone up to the camera, or up to the telescope eyepiece, and you can take video or take pictures. And I'm going to stop there because I don't want to step on what Lindsay's going to be talking about. But if you're interested in that, Lindsay's going to be doing a show on Friday. Friday? Yes, Friday. All about kind of the beginner's astrophotography. What kind of easy ways to step into this?
For both taking pictures through your telescope and also just taking night sky pictures with a regular camera. It's a lot easier than you think it is.
Yeah. So if you are interested, join us back here on Friday. I know I'm excited for it. I think I've seen you do it once before, a couple astronomy days ago.
Yeah.
But it's a lot simpler than you think. A lot simpler than you think. So yeah. Any questions coming in?
Nope.
No? Oh. All right, well, everyone, this is Quinn, my other cat, who has decided that she will not be outdone by Nova and has to appear as well. Special treat. You see both of my cats tonight. Yeah, she's a very loud one. You may have heard her in past streams.
That's great.
Eli or Jim?
I don't need to use my duct tape mount for my cell phone anymore.
No.
Yeah, I kind of take a toilet paper tube and some duct tape, and then no, maybe I should buy one of those.
This was, I think, $13.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, Lindsay, if you want,
number too.
I can send you the link if you want to include it Friday.
Sure.
This really cheap, really easy to use. Unless you're me and you accidentally unscrew this and then it falls apart in the middle of the night while you're streaming to lots of people on Facebook. That happened to me last night. But it's fine. It's fine. We had a great time last night. So I want to leave it open in case you do have any more questions. But while we wait to see, let me tell you about the rest of the week, because we are doing this all week. Tomorrow night, Jim Rock is going to be our guide to the indigenous skies. And we're very excited to have him back on. He was on, has it been a couple months now? I think it's been a little while since you were on last time. I think it was May. Because you talked about May Day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I'm excited to come back, and I'm also a little jealous of your cats. I have one cat, and nowhere to be seen. He's very independent. So maybe I can get him trained before tomorrow. AstroCat.
See, there are times that I wish they weren't so cute and cuddly when like I'm trying to do these streams or trying to work. I've had to clear off like half of my desk because that is where they will sleep and I can't have any books or anything there. Uh, any cat owners will know what I'm going through.
Oh yeah.
And so I've basically taken the like TV trays, the like standing TV trays, and I have a couple of those around my desk to serve as workspace since my actual desk has been taken over by my cats.
Well, it is astro appropriate, you know, because we have, of course, Leo, the lion, the biggest cat. We also have, you know, there's the lynx and so forth. In Ojibwe, we also have Mishibiju, or the big cat, curly tail. And what's interesting, just a little teaser for tomorrow, is the tail of curly tail is actually the head of Leo the lion. So whether you're from Africa or North America here, Turtle Island, we have a cat in that part of the sky. So
That's really
I don't know
cool.
if one of your cats is African and the other is native, or yeah.
Yeah, so we've got that tomorrow, which I'm excited. And then Thursday, we have Bob King, who's going to be joining us. Friday, as we said, Lindsay's going to be giving us a view into kind of how to get into astrophotography. And Saturday, we'll be taking you through the Messier objects, which are some really great things to look at through a telescope once you're a little bit more comfortable navigating the night sky. Now, I don't know that the telescope viewing is going to happen tonight. Just looking at the radar, it's looking like it's clouding up. If we do end up going live, it will be around 8:30 is when that's supposed to happen. Otherwise, I will post, I think there are a few places I've seen that might be doing some streams tonight. I will post those so that you can still get some views. And yeah, I think that's about it. Anything else anyone wants to add? Any questions come in last minute? No?
No questions.
All right. Well, then I guess we will call it there. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. And again, come back for the rest of the week. We've got a lot of great stuff happening this week. And yeah, that's it. We'll hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll see you next time. So, bye, everyone.